Okay, now wait a minute. Something is missing. It's right here. Duh.
Da. Yeah. May I ask you, how did you hear about us?
Meet up.
Meet up.
Over here.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. I
Okay.
know. Oh,
Yeah,
you're
that looks really
Rama. No, what's your name?
Manan.
Manam. Yeah, I saw your. Thank you for coming. Yeah, meet up. That's good.
Let's see.
So you want to make sure you're projecting behind you. Are you ready on that,
Sure.
Dr. Perkins?
Yes, ma'am. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to do a crash course. It's been years since I read this stuff.
Okay.
I want to make sure I'm succinct and coherent.
And
then
polish up.
Just in case you wondered, the portrait behind the screen there,
Uh-huh.
that is Queen Victoria's granddaughter. And her name is Queen Maria of Romania. And she presented her country as a female at the Treaty of Versailles, the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. And that was very unusual at that time for a woman to represent the country. Anyway, she bought of Astoria and Sam Hill. We know Sam Hill over here, right? And they were impressed with her from, it's a lot of Astoria hotels. And she invited them to come to her castle, and they did. They came to the castle. They said, wow, we got the New York State Fair coming up. Why don't you come over to this country and present your country, and go in the New York State Fair? She did. He said, because Sam Hill said, if you bring your coronation gowns and everything down at the Columbia River, I'm going to build you a museum. And he did. And she came with her children 2 seconds.
Is this going to be on so I can? This is not going to be on.
Yeah, that's your PowerPoint going to go up there.
Okay, so now this TV is not on.
So, Kamran, you need to talk to the techie guy. Don't talk to me.
Yeah, it's streaming.
Okay, no, I'm saying this screen is not on.
Turned off.
Okay, so you mean to tell me I am on YouTube right now, and I'm talking up here at the side of my neck?
Hey, Susan.
Hey, Susan. You got me some flowers.
Thank you, honey.
Oh, man.
Right
I hope
there.
ain't no bee inside it.
Thank you. So good to see you. Yeah, welcome. I'm going to introduce you. So don't just.
Virginia. Thank you, Susan.
And I'm going to then step up for a minute.
I want to go look at all the rooms. I gotta look at all the rooms.
Afterwards, we'll give
Yeah.
a tour. So sit down now because we're live streaming. And let me.
Okay, now wait a minute. Is this on?
Yeah.
Susan.
Okay, wait a minute.
What's your
No
name?
signal.
My name is Mana.
I just
Mana?
Manan.
There we go. Okay, because I just cut that back off.
So come in. We have a problem
You're
with
actually
somebody sitting
blocking
in
the
front of
live
the
stream
screen.
behind you.
I am.
Fine. You
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so
We have
leave
to
me
ask
over.
her to move.
So there you go. We're good. We're good.
Or I can even move the screen over a little.
We're good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Susan, you want to sit over here?
Awesome.
All right, let's appreciate for me. Are you in position or you're on behind me? We should have not started this early.
Oh, perfect.
I think
in school,
Okay.
that's not right.
Well, we're on live stream, so let's not start that. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody because we're live streaming now. I want to thank
We're live
everybody.
streaming, and that's live streamed.
So we are now going global actually with this. And so I want to, first of all, thank you all for coming. With some of us are meeting today for the first time. And it's always nice to make new friends. So here you are at the Unity Museum. And the vision of the Unity Museum is the wonders of humanity. We are certified consultants for United Nations human rights. There's nothing more important than those 30 articles of human rights. And therefore, we are already in Rwanda, we're in Cameroon, we're in many parts of the world, we're in Buffalo, New York, we're in Portland, Oregon, we are in Lansing, Michigan, we're in Detroit. So as you can see, the idea of the Unity Museum is starting to go global. And so we feel it is very important to support those articles, human rights articles. Every country picks and chooses which ones they like. And so freedom of this or freedom of that may not be all that exciting to some of the other nations, but sooner or later we're hoping to go from League of Nations, United Nations to World Federation. Because we do need to have a global perspective rather than just only the university district, in Seattle. But that is where it was born, and that's where we are today. So therefore, today is Martin Luther King Day. Well, it's tomorrow, but today we're celebrating here Martin Luther King Day. Because, let's think of the vital, but the most important issue in this country really is the topic of race. And we need to celebrate, we need to collaborate, we need to really walk the path of race. And I couldn't think of a better person when one day Virginia and Dr. Perkins walked into our life and became a board member for the Unity Museum and became a man of vision immediately. Those stairs, I know you all complained about the stairs. He said, we need to find you a building downstairs where we don't have to climb stairways to heaven. However, it is in the making. Then behind you, you'll see on a little screen, you see that big white building? That belongs to the Unity Museum. It's in Decentraland. Virtually, it is our International School of Global Peace Studies. The next event we will be streaming into our museum there also besides YouTube. So we're not only in virtual reality, we're also in live on YouTube. But now, Dr. Perkins, we are so excited. I know that you're have a long journey, have been a movie maker, have been a Seattleite that has added so much to our community. And we're so proud to have you as one of our board members. So today you're going to be talking about Futureshock. I remember when it came out, I'm just that old. I remember it well. And it was a shock at the time being. But what we're going to talk about is, in our presentation, is about what has come true since then. Are we in the middle of predictions? Are we in it now? Is this really happening? Should we have known then? But we said, nah, not really. But here we are, Dr. Perkins. Thank you very much.
Sabina, I'm honored.
To the Unity Museum.
I'm humbled and I'm honored. And for most of the people that know me, I always tell people, if I could act, I would have been an actor. And now I say, what's wrong with this picture? But it's human nature for people to want to be nice. And they'll tell you, well, maybe if you try it harder, or you can do it, because they want to be positive about when you tell them things like that. But children are they say children are the world's first philosophers, because all they do is say, why is this? Why is that? Why is this? Okay? But they're also honest. We were at a theater the other night, Virginia, and it was Friday. We were at a play in downtown Seattle. And it was such a wonderful performance. We had so many multicultural people, both from the BOPAC community, this, that, and the other. And they had a reception because this was the opening night of this theater. So I go around and I play with audience at times. I play these little Powerball games, to see who's going to get the right answers, just like when I was teaching college. And I used to tell my students, whoever, when I was teaching break-even analysis problems or whatever, and I would challenge those students, okay? And I would have $100 in my pocket. And I would tell them, anybody that can answer this question, the first one to answer this complex question, I'll give you $100. And then I told them, and because there's witnesses, you have two forms of contracts. One is called implied contracts in business law. Two forms of contracts, implied and expressed. More people go by the express contract because that's where you got to sign it, and it's always enforceable in court. But if you have enough witnesses that could say that you all had a deal and they witnessed it, it's called an implied contract. You don't have to have no signatures. So I would tell the students, whoever answered that question, I will give you $100 right now. And it's an enforceable contract because of the witnesses. So this one girl in the back, She was a little thin blonde haired girl, somewhere blonde hair in South Carolina, this real rural area of South Carolina when I had this appointment. And she answered the question, okay? She answered the question. I went into my pocket and I did pull out to give her a $100 bill, okay? And everybody witnessed it. And then everybody started laughing because I promised her $100 bill, but it was Monopoly money. You see? Therefore, I said, in the future, when you say somebody needs to challenge them about what is reality, we live in that kind of world today where our information is so twisted and we're sucking it in. They're bombarding us with right out of George Orwellian world of Big Brother newspeak to keep the information changing, to keep the populace confused and befuddled. That's Orwellian world number one. Now, these were visionaries before we were even born. George Orwell, when he wrote 1984. Alvin Toffler, when I first read Futureshock, I was a freshman in college. And my professor, we had radical professors back then because it was right at the end of the hippie movement and moving into the yippie movement. So Professor the late Dr. Peterson, this blonde, this white guy, he was deaf in one ear. He wore hearing aid, but he had hippie hair. He was aging, but he was still a radical activist from the hippie era. Okay, so he got us to read books like Futureshock, and he brought people into the classroom like Fannie Lou Hamer, who started the Mississippi voter rights movement. Fannie Lou Hamer of Mississippi. He brought into that class people like Russell Means, Dennis Banks, when they came to Cleveland, Ohio. So them kind of people we experienced in his classroom, I learned how to bring experts into my classrooms because of Dr. Peterson, the late Dr. Peterson, that I will always remember. Sometimes you have certain instructors and professors you never forget for the rest of your life. And I can remember a whole list of them. But anyway, I don't want to deviate too far. From reading Futureshock in 1973, when I entered a freshman college level, I'll never forget that book because I was reading it and I was seeing what he was envisioning, this coming of change. Alvin Toffler broke he opens up his book in 100-year intervals. And he mentioned that with the coming of the railroad, for example, we had 100 years to adapt. First, he go from Industrial Revolution to Post-Industrial Revolution in his books. One of the things one of his arguments was, it took 100 years with the Industrial Revolution. People had at least 100 years to adapt because it didn't happen overnight. It took years and years and years to get the car, the Model T, and people had the opportunity to relax and adapt, and they created new jobs in the economy. And a lot of those jobs were manufacturing jobs. 100 years it took for us to adapt from the Industrial Revolution to the Post-Industrial Revolution until what we're calling now the Information Age. And from the Information Age, this growth and rise of the service economy. When he talked about Futureshock, his main concept was that because the time we went from Post-Industrial to Information Age to service, we had less time to adapt. People were hit with this new technology like overnight. It's just like right now. I'm so confused when I pick up the telephone and I can't get an American on the phone. I can't get a human being on the phone. When we were children, when my parents went to somewhere on a Saturday night, we were with our grandparents when they went to sleep. We were children. Now we would get on the telephone and call the operator and curse her out, just plain. Shut up, you know what I'm saying? And then we would hang up the phone. She would be saying, "You kids, quit playing on the phone." And then we get tired of that. We would hang the phone up and find something else until we fell asleep in a corner on the floor, on the couch, in bed, or whatever. Okay, all of the kids were at my grandmother's house. Today, you pick up the telephone, and how many times I'll be cursing out them robots when they be like, and then they'll say, "I'm sorry, I didn't get that," or press. To get to a human being, you got to go through so many menus. Okay. This technology also has lessened our energy of time as a progressive nation. It takes so long to be on the phone to just get connected to a human being. And then when you're talking to somebody, "Hello, this is Raj." And I say, where the heck are you at, Raj? I'm in India, or I'm in the Philippines, or I'm over there. And I'm saying, well, where's the Americans? We done put more people out of work with this expediency of change till it's creating consequences. And that is what Alvin Toffler coined maladaptation. That's one of his biggest concepts, that people would not adapt as fast. And as a result, will have massive breakdown and mental illness, he said, by the millennium. That was his prediction. And it came to light. This is the Call and Post newspaper I got sitting up here. In 2008, I was teaching at one of the my alma mater that I graduated from. Whenever I went to Cleveland, Ohio, because the school I graduated from was the same business school that John D. Rockefeller graduated from, was a private business school in downtown Cleveland, where the great John D. that built the railroad and the Standard Oil. It was called Spencer Dyke College at the time because it was private. It changed hands, but always it had its background. Then it was Myers because somebody went in and bought it. By the time, so because I was one of their successes with a PhD and this, that, and the other, whenever I went home to Cleveland, I always had an adjunct job there with these universities, okay? But I never hung around too long because I wasn't about sitting in a box all day long just thinking up stuff to write on papers, and don't nobody read that stuff, but this, that person, that's why they call them peer review. Men like me, they call people like us, they call us, it's practice, theory to practice, practice to theory. So they always come up with something. They want to be pure researchers. They call us applied researchers because we're in the field, but they want to be pure researchers because they thinking stuff up, which also is contributing to our future shock and maladaptation, because what they think of is fool's gold, just like that $100 bill that I convinced, and I did that to a lot of students, okay? So I'm gonna bring this forward, then get back into Mr. Toffler. I gave you the metaphor, the analogy of the $100 bill that was monopoly money. So Virginia, now when we go to these different theater events, and especially when they have receptions, I normally cue the people, and this is how I play this little game. I tell them, the performance was so great, it was live. And then I would say, if I was an actor, if I could act, I would say, if I could act, I could have been an actor. And then because it's human nature not to want to offend nobody, they want to be respectful. So they'll say, well, maybe you could try later on, or perhaps you could be a good actor, but they're adults. And they say children are the most honest creatures on earth, are our children. They say children are also the greatest philosophers because all they do is, what is this? Why is that? Ask all of the questions. You shut up. If I asked that child, the adults gave me their answers. But I would say, if I asked that to a child, if I could act, I could be an actor. What's wrong with this picture? And a child would look up at you and say, you can't act, duh. That's the answer. So when I cue these people, I'm trying to see who still has the child in them or the courage to stand up and tell the truth. Virginia, am I not lying? I told it. So I'm cueing these people, getting all of these different responses. And it was one elderly woman. As we were leaving, I asked her the same thing. Wow, that was such a great event, that theater performance. I could have been an actor. What's wrong with this picture? And she said, you can't act. Now,
I disagree. I think you can act.
but anyway,
it's got the child in him to tell the truth too.
So I was so I had to go back into there and tell how many people that we have a winner. She won the lottery. It's metaphorically, because I didn't have no $500 million to give nobody, but I could have sure came up with something. I have a computer printer. Of course, it would have been well, I don't want the Secret Service coming after me, so I didn't go and print up some money, But anyway, let me get back to why I'm mentioning these different metaphors. Alvin Toffler was considered a visionary. It made so much sense when I read his book, till years later down the line, I was teaching in Ohio, and this beautiful woman of the Call and Post newspaper, Ohio's oldest free black press newspaper in the country, in the state of Ohio, was the Call and Post. It was founded by black inventor of the gas mask and the street light, Garrett Morgan. And here in the Union Museum, they have a replica of the street light, and they have other things about Mr. Garrett Morgan that I was impressed that was all the way here across the Pacific. I mean, because across the United States of America, from all the way over there to here, Garrett Morgan, and a lot of people in Cleveland to this day probably still don't know the background of the richness of Mr. Garrett Morgan. Garrett Morgan, when he founded the Call and Post newspaper, it was in the early 20s, shortly after World War I, because remember they had so many gas attacks in them trenches. Garrett Morgan built this gas mask invention, and at the time in Ohio, there was a salt mine collapse. Garrett Morgan and his brother Daniel E. Morgan, they donned his new invention, and he went into that salt mine on the lake area, and he pulled out 150 white male miners who was trapped with his invention, with that gas mask invention. Garrett Morgan, after that, he started marketing this invention. Sales were skyrocketing all over the country, from all over the country, from police departments, the military, all kind of emergency type, fire departments. Then they found out he was a black man. The sales dropped to zero. And Garrett Morgan reportedly made the statement that the white man rather die than let the black man save him. So he wanted to get the word out about about racism, like W.E.B. Du Bois did years prior to that, when he founded the Crisis and newspaper, news magazine, and he founded the NAACP. National, Mr. W.E.B. Du Bois, 1868, 1963, when he founded the Crisis newspaper. So Garrett Morgan had the same kind of vision as African Americans, the descendants from sharecroppers or slaves, as they left places when the migration to the promised land. They went northward from states like Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama. They went, the sword of migration went that way. And a lot of those former slave and former descendants of slaves and sharecroppers, they wound up in places like Cleveland, Ohio, Pittsburgh, Harlem, Detroit, Chicago. Then another migration to the promised land came from states like Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas. And that sword went southwestward that way. And the descendants of slaves and sharecroppers landed up in places like first California, then eventually Seattle, Washington, in which they founded the Central District eventually. The Central District was founded by William Gross. William Gross founded the Central District when he gave Henry Esler 1,000 gold coins. And that was the seed that led to the development of the Central District neighborhood, where it became the Harlem Renaissance of jazz back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. But what's born there out of that came Quincy Jones, born in the Central District, Jimi Hendrix. Ray Charles got his first start there on Jackson Street at Maynard, right there at Maynard and Jackson. It's that building right at that corner, 6th and Maynard, right in there. But Ray Charles, that was his first gig playing the piano, blind Ray Charles. The history was so rich. We did a documentary, some friends of mine, we convinced the city funders, and we did a documentary called Memory Lane, where the seniors who were still alive was telling the story. They told the story about the Central District, and there's a lot to that, but I'm not going to get too distracted now because I have to stay focused. And I'll tell y'all this too, folks. I used to have to tell my students, sometimes I get on that wall of China and I keep walking, and it's a big wall. So they had my permission to pull me back, metaphorically, to come back down to earth, okay? So I'm trying not to lose my chain of thought, because It's just that fast. And I tell people all the time, it's not that we're getting old. It's just that we have so much knowledge in our head. It's like a library, a long hall of books. You got to find out which one is on which shelf. It's there. But let me get focused back on the call and post and why this is so important and my relationship with the call and post. And some of that's here when, the call and post, old archives, my father's case was in it in 1959, as the free sharecroppers, descendants of slaves, made it up into those immigrant neighborhoods where the other immigrants that had preceded them, working class immigrants, they resented the sharecroppers moving into the neighborhoods. The police became the terror. The police became the new Ku Klux Klan. And the call and post, those old archived call and post newspapers are here in the Unity Museum with my father's case on it. You'll see me as a little boy. You'll see my brother, my two sisters, which we know it's only my oldest sister and myself that's left out of my father's family, Jeff Perkins. He was a veteran from World War II, from the Korean War. He was an honest man, a working class man, a blue collar man. My uncles, all of them, they had blue collars, green collars, because there were so many jobs in America. They could walk to their jobs in their neighborhoods. They had manufacturing firms in those neighborhoods of Cleveland, like other cities here in United States of America. And I'm saying all of that to lead up back into Futureshock, okay? Now, from March 28th to Labor Day weekend, Saturday, September the 5th, 1959.
My birthday.
Mercy. There were 8 black men had been shot dead by Cleveland racist Cleveland police for least minor infraction of anything. My father, being a good man, had taken a woman daughter to the hospital at night that holiday weekend. He was coming home driving a beautiful new car, and a cop started following him on this dark street on a motorcycle. My father, black men were so afraid to be stopped by cops. They preferred to be with witnesses or be in front of their house. So my father kept on because his house was only about a half a block more up. When he turned off of the street 6, off of St. Clair, it was there. The cop alleges, because there were witnesses, like a lot of black folks knew, there would be black people sitting on the porch, like they used to do in the old days, the Southerners. When he pulled up, sure enough, we had relatives sitting on the porch, but the cop, Bobby Dunn, when he got out of the car, he said, "Nigga, didn't I tell you when I catch you, I'm going to kill you?" And he pulled out a .350 Magnum and at point blank shot my father in his left eye. The bullet came out of his right ear. That was in 1959. I was turning 5 years old. I was 4 years old. My birthday is in November, so I was close to my 5th birthday. So you remember a lot as a child at the age of 4 or 5, 3 years old. My father's case became Congressman Louis Stokes' first civil rights case. And it's mentioned in his book, The Gentleman from Ohio, which is also here in the Unity Museum. They have a copy. They have all of those newspapers, the original Call and Post newspapers from 1959 with that case, because it continued on and on. It was ruled justifiable homicide. The police alleged that my father went for a knife. They found a knife in the car on the passenger's side, of some kind of fish knife. Because, back in the 50s, people, blacks would fight with knives, or anybody in them bars or whatever. It was the knife was the weapon of mass destruction back then. People get into it and they just stab one another. But the coroner, from the sudden death, your body leaving your soul so fast with that magnum shot, my father's hands were on the steering wheel. They had to pry his fingers off the steering wheel, had to pry his fingers off. Now, how can a man go for a knife? Because black males were told whenever the police stop you, put your hands on the steering wheel, like parents have to tell their kids today, do this, that, even the middle class, for fear that there's no accountability to police for their murder of innocent men, women, and children that's of color. That case kept going on. It's in books. It's in the book by Louis Lomax, The Negro Revolt in 1962. Louis Lomax became the first black journalist to work on television with Dan Rather. It's in his book, in his one chapter called In the Negro Revolt. He talks about beyond the Southland as people of color, black sharecroppers, moved into them northern and Midwest states. He had police murders in Chicago, Detroit, New York, Cleveland is where he talked about my case, in which even in the police report, the officer didn't even identify himself. They just called him Officer B. He shoots Jeff Perkins. My mother is on the pictures. If you look at the Call and Post, they got all of those original big pictures of it from 1959. You'll see my mother.
I'll give you a tour and then you'll see all the newspaper articles.
My mother, after all of that tragedy, she had 4 kids and now no husband. She became the first black woman police dispatcher trainer in the whole state of Ohio. When she died in 2008, cops came from all over the country and the state to her funeral. They led the procession past our new house, which was in a suburb by that time, a working class suburb called East Cleveland. My mother used to raise us that don't let the actions of one white person make you collectively put all white people in that pot of, it's called collective racism. My mother taught us to judge a person, like Dr. King said, by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. I have had more white people promote my career throughout my career and admire me for my achievements than some of my own kind because of jealousy. And like W.E.B. Du Bois talked about in his book, The Souls of Black Folks, how African Americans act like crabs in a barrel. When my brother trying to get out, they want to pull them down. These are things that we call Dr. Chris Argyris in his book here, which is an outstanding book. And I met Dr. Argyris when I was a graduate student at the University of Pittsburgh. He wrote a book called Overcoming Organizational Defenses. And I have used some of his concepts in some of my analysis of phenomena out here, especially when I'm out there in the field and I'm working with these different organizations. One of them he coined is called the undiscussable. Another one he coined was called skilled incompetence. Now I'm gonna bring all of those concepts back when I get deeper into Alvin Toffler and the change of our world, that it really is Futureshock and what is, at least through my lens, and I'm gonna use supporting data to show what is maladaptation and why there's so much mental illness, just like Toffler predicted by the millennium. This article, I got an opportunity. Teaching again in Cleveland, there was a woman who came to one of my classes, and she was a vice president of marketing of the Call and Post. And she wanted me to meet Constance Harper. She was so impressed with my public administration class I was teaching at the time. She set up a meeting. We had lunch. I went to visit. Constance Harper was the editor of the Call and Post at the time. The Call and Post longest editor was William O. Walker, who came from Pittsburgh, one of those presses of Pittsburgh, when they recruited him back in the 30s to take over that newspaper. Garrett Morgan, when he created the newspaper, it was only called The Call at the time because he wanted to bring attention to racism and hate as people of color are moving into those northern states. He called the newspaper The Call. But there was another black man trying to teach the sharecroppers how to do finance and business. He ran a newsletter called The Post. And they collectively united and it became The Call and Post. So Constance Harper, because of the work that I've done of the career, they were on their 90th anniversary. They had gotten a lot of money because the Call and Post basically are black Republicans. William O. Walker, who ran it from the 30s until his death in the late early 90s, I believe, he was a black Republican. Here, this woman is asking me, a revolutionary, a radical, an activist, you know. And I told her it'd be an honor because it gave me an opportunity. She asked me to find, they were coming up on their 90th anniversary. She said, Dr. Perkins, go to the libraries, go anywhere, but find as much information about the Call and Post as you can because they received a lot of funding from conservative groups and banks like National City Bank and others up there in Ohio because Republicans. They put up $7,000, and I took the bait. And I'm gonna tell you, if you know, you think that monopoly money was good then, let me tell you how they played me. Okay, well she didn't, but let me finish the story. It was an honor for me to go. The Cleveland Public Library is one of the best libraries in the nation. Cleveland, in the 1800s, before Doc Maynard came here, I got Doc sitting over here somewhere. Here's Doc Maynard. Here's something a lot of people don't know. In Cleveland and here, here's Doc Maynard, the man who invented Seattle by Bill Spidell, who runs the underground tour here in Seattle.
Right.
So Doc Maynard was from Cleveland, Ohio. Doc Maynard went to Western Reserve where he got his medical doctorate at Western Reserve. That is now today is Case Western Reserve University. Doc Maynard came from Case Western Reserve University. He came here along the Oregon Trail back in 1800s, early 1800s. Did you know that Doc Maynard patterned the city plan of Seattle after the city plan of Cleveland, Ohio? Did you know it's all in here? Thank you, Mr. Spidell. He was a good researcher. Did you know that Doc Maynard, when he started the lumber along the Puget Sound Road that took lumber from Seattle down to Olympia and all of that, as this region was growing, did you know Doc Maynard used that same model that they were using to transport lumber down along the Cuyahoga River? The Cuyahoga River that caught fire in the early 70s, it was so polluted. Doc Maynard, they called him, he was we have a concept in public administration for people who like do everything. Doc Maynard was the friends with the Indian. He ran the general store. He did this, he did that. He had the lumber business. We have a concept for these kind of players in public administration. We call them the multiple hat wearer. Doc Maynard was the quintessential multiple hat wearer. He was adaptable to all kind of situations. And I'm going to tell you more about, he was in the box, okay? And my metaphor for about thinking outside the box, okay? Doc Maynard was a great man. And he was from Cleveland, Ohio. Now here, too many years later, Doc Perkins from Cleveland, Ohio. Doc Perkins went to Case Western Reserve University in Upward Bound. Before I went to college, we went to this, that's when Upward Bound came out, when they was putting all of this money so African-American kids and poor kids could catch up with remedial education, can learn about a college. We stayed on the dormitory. So now there's another commonality that Doc Maynard and I have. We were both from Cleveland. He came along the Oregon Trail.
Can you pass that one?
Yes, ma'am. When Doc Maynard came along the Oregon Trail, when my mother died in 2008, I had been flying so much in my career, teaching at different universities. So I'm flying all the time, and I got so tired of those airplanes and that turbulence, and them planes shaking, and I'm wondering if this big bird getting ready to drop. You hear? So I always wanted to see, I wanted to try something different, and I'd never been to the Pacific Northwest. And you know how I ended up here. First of all, a former girlfriend of mine in Pittsburgh, when we were graduate students, she was now living in Portland, Oregon. She invited me to come to Portland, Oregon. Another former friend invited me to go to Atlanta, Georgia. I didn't want to go back to the South because I taught in the South, and my folks are all from Mississippi and Alabama. And even though I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, I still have a Southern drawl because of the theory of nature nurture. You see, it's just like I tell people when they ask me, where are you from? Are you country? You know, I tell them about the nature nurture theory. Like when the first immigrant Italians came to the 5 Points of New York, the immigrants. And the next generation, because they were all into these, places that was cramped in, nature nurture, the children, even though they were not born in Italy, they still talking like this. You see, they still are talking. If you look at The Godfather Part 2, you know, where they go back to the old streets of Harlem, of New York City, and coming to you know, they all sound like they mamas and daddies, but one or two of them, they weren't born in Italy, but the nurture. So when people try and belittle me for my country accent, I tell them all the time, I'm country and I'm proud. There's nothing wrong with being country if you live in this country. So let me get back on it. I told you about that Great Wall of China. I got to get focused again. Now, Doc Maynard came here, and so did I. To this day, I done brought over $2 million to the streets of the city of Seattle and all kind of grants for all kind of organizations. I have some major projects right now, and even though I'm retired, I continue to work because, not that I have to, but because I can, because my God has been a good God, and I got a good education. So now, let me get back into the call and post as to how I got back into Alvin Toffler. I had to revisit Toffler after sitting in that library. I said for one summer in that hot downtown Cleveland Public Library, every day I got up, I was there. They had all of these rows of microfiche. And I always would teach my students, when you start with a task, start at the beginning. So I got one microfiche after the other. I started with the first one there. And I'm going to show you exactly what I found. I'm going to get out of this for a second, okay? And I'll come back to that. But here's the first. Look at this here. Look at the richness that I found in these Call and Post newspapers. This right here, when I got the microfiche, Hitler snubs Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens was from Cleveland, Ohio. If you look at this one here, here's Langston Hughes' mother beaten in a store. The great poet Langston Hughes lived in the Woodland area of Cleveland, Ohio. His mother was mugged at one of the local community grocery stores. I'm looking at this rich history when Mrs. Harper, Sarah Harper, not Sarah Harper, Connie Harper, Constance. Her sister was a famous common pleas judge, Sarah Harper. She is in Carl Stokes' book, Promises of Power, and I think she's also in Louis Stokes' book, The Gentleman from Ohio. But anyway, when Constance Harper, she hired me to look for this stuff, I'm printing out all of this rich stuff. Look at this here. Langston Hughes' mother beaten in a grocery store. Look at this title here. The U.S. Census Bureau reveals migration trend. Look at this. Watch this here. I'm going to bring this up. Look, you see this?
Step a little side, honey, so we can see.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me get this up here.
Yeah.
Now, okay. So can they see it on the?
Now you can.
So all that other time I was showing that stuff, you couldn't see it.
Well, I could see it.
But I'm talking about the YouTube people couldn't see.
Now I can't see.
I'm sorry, YouTube audience. I told you, that Great Wall of China is a big wall. Y'all got to pull me off it now. But anyway, look at the U.S. Census Bureau reveals the migration trends. Georgians lead in Cleveland, Alabamians second. So remember I was explaining to you that migration wave from Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. Proof is in the pudding about how they were searching for the promised land. They wanted to be free. They wanted to have opportunities. So that was another interesting observation that I uncovered. But let me move forward faster.
So I want to ask you a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You were telling me about Toffler, how we went from the industrial, and then we had the information age, but now we're in the technology age.
Yes, I'm gonna get there.
Oh, okay.
Susan, Miss
And then
Plunkett.
Technology to AI. That's the question.
I'm gonna get there.
Okay, good.
Keep hope alive.
I'm your segue.
Breathe deeply.
I'm your segue.
I heard that. Now listen, look at this here. Look what I uncovered also as a major headline. Look at that. Negro votes go to FDR. The New Deal. And I'll tell you all why this is so important when you look at all of these so-called Black Republicans and these other conservative people that forever want to cut back in social safety net programs to help the poor. Like one of them, like that Senator Tim Scott in South Carolina, he just makes me so angry the way he always talking about, we were so poor. He trying to look all into the camera. My mother was so poor. So I told Virginia one day when I'm listening to him and some of them other Republicans, I said, here's a research question for academia. Let's find out, did any of those poor people get food stamps, get any kind of social spending programs under social safety net programming from New Deal all the way up through Ronald Reagan's government devolution out of social spending programs. Remember, we had Dust Bowls. We just watched a movie the other day with one of the greatest movies of all time with Burt Lancaster, Elmer Gantry.
Mm.
The setting is the Prohibition era, and he's a con man. And he's Gene Simmons, the beautiful Gene Simmons is the missionary girl, and you had Carolyn Jones that eventually became Morticia Adams on the Addams Family, the beautiful Carolyn Jones at the time. It's a great, beautiful movie to see with Burt Lancaster as this minister, this evangelist in the heart of the evangelist South, preaching the Bible. You okay? So people had food stamps when FDR passed the Social Security Act of 1935. They created ADC, AFC, Aid to Families and Children. AFC. Oh, it's been a long time since I taught those policies. But anyway, what they saw going on is that the evangelist states were not giving welfare to women that had kids out of wedlock. They were considered bad women. So it took 30 more years for them to address that. And under the John F. Kennedy administration, him and Lyndon Johnson did, because they went from AFC to AFDC. AFC, Aid to Families and Children. AFDC was modified, amended to Aid to Families with Dependent Children. You didn't have to be married or whatever. It took 30 more years to fix that wrong. Under the Social Security Act of 1935, under the FDR administration, the New Deal. Virginia and I went to several buildings around here. You'll see the New Deal Works Progress Administration, WPA, that put a lot of people back to work. You'll see theater. You'll see a lot of stuff. Even in Hollywood, you'll see the logo. If you look at some of the 30s movies, you'll see the National Recovery Act, Hollywood Productions. All of that came out of social spending legislation. Here's an outstanding book by Blanche D. Cole called Safety Net, Welfare, and Social Security, 1929 to 1979. She goes over all of those policies. This is an outstanding book, and I used to teach this book to my students. When I taught a class in public policy from New Deal to New Federalism, when Ronald Reagan came into office, they took the approach of, it's called government devolution out of social spending programs. Because they were arguing that there's budget hikes and the budget is not balanced because of all of this welfare stuff. So they started cutting out a lot of social spending programs. And who did they target most at that time? Were youth programs under War on Poverty, Lyndon Johnson. In my doctoral dissertation, I created the data. I took it and showed as the cuts in the alphabet of programs to target to prevent juvenile delinquency. As those cuts, as the graph went this way, you saw a new phenomenon creep into our culture. It was called gang violence in the 80s. I correlated the rise in gang activity as the social spending cuts graph went this way, the rise in gang and underground economies and all of that went up this way. So when people sit back and say Reagan was responsible for the homelessness situation of mental illness people because they took all of that money out of mental illness institutions and kicked them people out on the street, I tell them, well, he was also responsible for the creation of gangs. You see, theoretically, but I'm going to tie all of that back into Alvin Toffler's Futureshock. As soon as I get this background stuff out of the way, then I'm going to get to the foreground as to why I'm here, okay? The Calling Post, look at this. I found so much richness in this newspaper. Cleveland gets his first African-American librarian. Zora Neale Hurston, the great poetess. So it goes on. I found so much richness in that library on those microfiche. Here's another sample that I put together for Miss Constance Harper. And then I'll tell you all why I'm saying this in 1 second. Okay, let me see. Look at this. Sends a judge in Georgia sent Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to a chain gang. Did you all know that? You see this here, the calling point. Look at this headline. This is 19th. Well, it's oh mercy. Well, it was 60 something. Okay, when Kingdom was championing civil rights legislation and equality. A judge sends Dr. Martin Luther King. He was sentenced to a chain gang. Remember what was that singer Sam Cooke? Remember that record? Working on the chain gang, going down south, working. Whoo! I got that Sam Cooke. Okay. So this is more information that hadn't been known. And they were all sitting on these microfiche in a closet in the Cleveland Public Library, and one of them archive things that they had to roll out. Let me move on down. Here was, get him. Jim Brown just died this year. And here he was. Jim Brown hangs up that famous number 32 jersey to go into the movies, where he started making these, they calling them black exploitation movies. I'm going to get you, sucker. And all of that guitar music and them polyester clothes and stack heels and fat ties, and they were gangsters in Harlem. Jim Brown gave up his 32 jersey to pursue his Hollywood dream and career. He mentioned that also before he died. Okay? The great Jim Brown. There he is in The Dirty Dozen. That was his first film debut. Did you ever see The Dirty Dozen?
Yes.
Remember at the end when Lee Marvin tell them they're on this other side of the bridge and he got the bombs and he tell him, Jefferson, that was his name. Jefferson, drop the bombs in, we'll meet you up there. First of all, Jim Brown looked hesitant, but remember he was a running back. So he got a chance in The Dirty Dozen to do that running as he was dropping them bombs. And of course, some German came up from over something and just shot him down with a machine gun at the end, okay? But that was his movie debut in The Dirty Dozen, okay? Here is one. Oh, Carl Stokes wins. Carl Stokes Victory Army enjoys downtown festival. Carl Stokes. Now, I remember when I met Mr. Stokes, I was in the 7th grade, I think by then now, in junior high school, at Patrick Henry Junior High School. And when Carl Stokes got elected mayor, we were so proud. And he came to the schools, and the teachers had all of their class people come out, and we lined up along the locker. And as the mayor came down, he was shaking hands. I just stuck my hand out there, and he shook it. And I went home telling everybody, I'm not going to never wash this hand again. Of course, I lied because, but anyway, we were so proud of Carl Stokes. And when Carl Stokes was no longer mayor, he ran first he was a news reporter in New York City. Then he came back to Cleveland and got elected as a municipal judge. I ran back into Carl Stokes again because when I was a graduate student at the University of Pittsburgh for Black History Month, when I heard that Carl Stokes was coming to Pittsburgh, it was one of the worst winter nights at the opening of Black History Month. And I was standing on top of this hill, called Sugar Top Hill in Pittsburgh. And this African guy in the building, I got him to drive us down to the university. We had to go down the steep hill because Pittsburgh has hills too, just like Seattle. It's like, but these hills here are hills on steroids. Pittsburgh got hills, but these here are hills on steroids. But anyway, African, they don't know how to drive down hills on ice. So this African Logi Sacco, that he was working on his doctorate in education in another department, and he one of them kind of players that like to look at you when he driving. And we're going down this spooky hill from the University Stadium area. And I'm telling him, Jeff, it's all right. And I get your eyes on the road, dude. But anyway, soon as we get there to the student union, somebody had just left out of the men's room. And guess who we ran into? It was Carl Stokes. He had gray hair by then. I was like, Your Honor. And then I started telling him about how we met at Cleveland at Patrick Henry and what I'm doing now. He was proud of me. I was proud of him. He gave me a signed autograph of his book, and I have it on my shelf. His book, Promises of Power, he signed it and personally gave it to my best friend and buddy, Jeff Perkins. He allegedly, he claimed that he remembered me from Patrick Henry Junior High School, but I know he's a politician, and we know they always double talk to you. Yeah, I'm not gonna say man lied, but Orwell called it a double speak, But anyway, the Carl Stokes, I was involved with a class called, it was a research methodology class, program evaluation, statistical class. I needed a project. I asked Carl Stokes, can I do his Cleveland Now project? Cleveland Now, because of the riots of the 67, 66 and 67 riots, first it was the Huff riot, then it was the Glenville riot. And you can see all of that. If you go to that Eyes on the Prize, the last series is called The Power Years. They show you what Cleveland looked like when the riots were going on and the National Guards was on the streets in Huff and Glenville. And Carl Stokes is portrayed in Eyes on the Prize, The Power Years. It's look it up, check it out, so you can see what Cleveland looked like then. And then I'm gonna get back into Futureshock and giving you the background now as to why it's a wasteland today. But I'll get there. Carl Stokes he said, come to Cleveland. He invited me to his judge's chambers, which was in this Justice Center tower, way up there on this beautiful high rise and in the Justice Center of Cleveland, Ohio. And I took the Greyhound from Pittsburgh, and I kept my appointment there. I had a suit on, and when I stepped on that carpet, it was like, whoa, my feet like was sinking in. I was like on a cloud. I was like, boy, people with money and power, they can't live. He had this beautiful view. But he also gave me a package of a whole lot of data about the Cleveland Now program. And I turned it into a program which I got an A+ in this class, okay? The Cleveland Public Library, Virginia Now, when we went there to visit it a few years ago, and my friend John Scarrick, who's running it right now, the special collections, he's a great man. He used to come to my class and present stuff about the library, and it's a long story behind that. But they did not have an evaluation of Cleveland Now, but I still had a copy, my graduate paper. And Virginia Now presented the Cleveland Public Library. Now, my graduate paper, Evaluation of Cleveland Now, is in Carl Stokes' collection at the Cleveland Public Library. You see, and I was honored. But this is just another example of how rich this newspaper was. Okay, here is the Glenville riot. What happened in Glenville? You see, that came after the Huff riot. Glenville was the neighborhood that my father was murdered in. It was on a street in the neighborhood of Glenville. So I took Virginia on a tour of all of that stuff. It then radically changed. And I'm gonna get out of this. Here is more evidence of social dislocation. Black on black crime. You see. So I'm gonna get out of this now and get back to the foreground, okay? I just wanted to give you an example as to how rich that database was. And because of the research that I did, I recommended that this newspaper be digitalized so the world can see the Call and Post newspapers. And right now, the Call and Post newspaper is digitalized because Don King took it over after William O. Walker died. The boxing promoter Don King bought the Call and Post, and now it's a King publication. It's on there somewhere. It's up there, King Media. He's very wealthy now. He was the former box promoter of Muhammad Ali. He was a gangster also at one time when he had a past in Cleveland with the Numbers families and all. I'm not going to get into a lot of Mr. King's past because he's doing a lot of great good today, and hallelujah. We have to forgive people, because we are human beings. He does a great good here, but it was an honor to do this work because I made such a compelling argument. I wanted to bring people together. Because of chronic unemployment, I did a study on chronic unemployment in Cleveland. I looked at it since Cleveland is divided by the east side and the west side. The west side was where whites basically communities and neighborhoods were. The east side was where basically black communities were. So when I did the data and I calculated chronic unemployment, all of these red spots in neighborhoods of Cleveland where the black people live was chronic unemployment, high rates of unemployment. Chronic unemployment. And it wasn't like that on the white side, on the west side. So I did some presentations of that research. Is that me?
Don't pay attention.
I heard that.
Keep on going. Keep on
It's
going.
in my briefcase. I bet it's Cynthia. But okay, listen, let me finish.
technology.
I heard that. I thought I cut.
Keep on
Virginia,
going.
please. You know,
No.
I'm sorry, folks. I'm gonna get back to Mr. Toffler in 1 second. I thought I cut this.
No,
Right.
because you're on, don't answer phones in the middle of
So
the
she's
lobby.
gonna, she's gonna.
She's
turn
not gonna. Virginia, please. Let me do this here, darling. I'm gonna cut it off. Sorry, folks.
it
Oh boy, oh boy.
The world is watching you.
I know that.
It's tracking us.
Yes, indeed. Oh, it's Dr. Vanessa Love. She's supposed to be coming here, and I know she's probably on her way, but I'm not going to respond to her.
Thank
She-
you.
You know, if she can't make it, she'll be back again.
Back to
So,
Futureshock.
okay, yes. Let me cut this phone off.
That's what YouTube's for.
Okay, now.
Yes.
So
Make sure it's working.
listen, I'm going to wrap this up so I can get back into Futureshock. Okay, but I had to give you the background in order to get to the foreground as to how I came back to Futureshock. I revisited Futureshock. When I was in that public library, I spent that whole summer down there in that public library going through the microfiche. I saw some observations that I had never seen before in the city of Cleveland, downtown Cleveland, particularly chronic homelessness and mental illness. People sleeping on the streets, people at the bus stops talking to themselves. So after I did the success of the research findings for the Calling Post that led to the digitalization of the Calling Post, Constance Harper, I convinced her, she contracted with me again to do a 3-part series to find out why there's so much mental illness in downtown Cleveland. And I looked at this through the lens of Alvin Toffler. Some of the excerpts from this, it was a 3-part series. Part 1 was coping with mental illness. Part 1, downtown was highly visible homeless. Who are they really? Part 2 was, where are the mentally challenged and homeless downtown? You know, I put together the graph and I work with the city planners to track where they are, how they concentrated. And it's a similarity to the way the mental illness and shelters are built in downtown city of Seattle. But I'll get to that when I get into Futureshock and maladaptation. Okay, I'll bring you back to the millennium. This part right here was part 3. What are we doing to help? And this is one groundbreaking event that I was invited to, and there I am interviewing some of these people at these new facilities that they built. Okay, the need for housing is also a human right. We have a lot of human rights. So I'm gonna get back into some of the things that came out of this. When I looked at this case, when I looked at the mental illness, and because I remembered Futureshock, Alvin Toffler's major concept was maladaptation. I opened up this article with local media reporters have recently reported a rash of troubling encounters between the mentally challenged, homeless, and the public in downtown Cleveland and surrounding areas. The reports are frightening, such as young black male who boards an RTA bus and throws a veil of acid into the face of a lovely young black female. While both are strangers, unbeknownst to the lovely young lady is her assailant's history of serious mental illness. A black male shoots and kills a veteran Cleveland Heights police officer. Recently released from prison, the gunman, hearing voices, had stopped taking his prescribed psychotic medication. In a public housing project, a young black woman stabs her 2 young daughters and drowns them in the bathtub. The woman was reported to be suffering severe postpartum depression. So I'm looking at all of this stuff right here, and remember, I say on downtown streets with names like Euclid, Superior, and St. Clair, people who are homeless, mentally challenged, are visible daily. They can be seen at bus shelters, public libraries, and on street corners. Remember, I saw that when I was doing all of that research in downtown Cleveland, not been home for years. While they wander the streets and nestle in downtown public places, their abnormal behaviors allow us to separate the mentally challenged homeless from the traditional homeless who also wander the streets of downtown and nestle in public places. In September 2007, the Calling Post began a 3-month investigation of what appears to be an ever-growing presence of the mentally challenged in downtown. This is a 3-part series that came out of it. Okay, I'm gonna move forward with this. I'm gonna say now, let me get into how I linked it to Toffler. Let us examine, okay, however, before identifying the homeless and mentally challenged, let us first revisit the acclaimed 1970 best-selling book, Futureshock by Alvin Toffler, renowned futurist. Let us examine if what he forecasted in 1970 may provide insight into our description of the disproportionately rising numbers of homeless and mentally challenged people, especially Black people in the city of Cleveland, because Cleveland was the focus. In 1970, Toffler predicted within the next few decades, many individuals will suffer Futureshock because of their inability to quickly adapt to sudden accelerated change caused by rapid shifts from a manufacturing culture to an information high-tech culture. Okay, remember, my father, my uncles, and them, when we were kids, we used to watch them walk to work. It was so many plants and manufacturing firms. I did a graduate paper years and years ago when I was, young and upcoming. I did a global paper on chronic unemployment and as a causation of crime. And I looked at different countries, including the United States, and there is a high correlation between chronic unemployment and crime. No jobs, okay? Now, our jobs continue to disappear. You can't cut on the news without hearing about AI taking away jobs. Now, what are we gonna do, huh? But let me get back into from the industrial age, 100 years, to post-industrial age, about 100 years, people had a chance to adapt. This information and service age, they did not have 100 years. This stuff continued to change every night. Now, artificial intelligence is our biggest threat, in my opinion, when you got doctors talking about they're going to start letting robots administer us medication or whatever. When you have AI, Fox News tried a virtual reporter. Oh, come on. Don't we have enough with that channel without now them giving us robots? I mean, I'm not putting down Mr. Fox, Rupert Murdoch. But I'm just saying, like, I don't want no, I like my women I see on the news, and I'm like, tell me that news, girl, you hear? But who wants to see a robot? I mean, it's right out of the Jetsons, okay? Remember that robot in the cartoon, the Jetsons? I forgot the robot's name, but Rosie, yeah. Okay, but let me get back to, okay, now. Okay, let me see here. In 1970, Toffler predicted within the next few decades, many will suffer future shock from the ability to adapt accelerated change. And he said, the ability to adapt to change too rapidly will cause many to suffer mental stress by having to make too many unexpected decisions. It's just like when we pick up the phone today, and we being so progressive from baby boomers. You had to take care. You picked up the call. We had operators in our hospitals. We talked to human beings. We got it done quick. Now we got to go through a list of menus. I'll be like this. Don't be in a rush. Yeah, just to get to. And if you don't get all of that, push 0 or push 3 or push 6 or 7, and you can talk to a representative. You got to go through all of this, and then if you get hung up, yes, ma'am.
Zoom calls when your doctor doesn't want to do an in-person and wants you to do a Zoom call. He said the Zoom call can help you get over what disease you have.
Oh, no, I don't want no Zoom.
I know, right? Exactly. I want an in-person appointment.
I heard that. I got a controlled shock the other day, Friday, and I ain't letting no way. Well, but let me not go there, okay? Let me see now. Okay. Futureshock, Toffler warned, will likely be the result of numerous persons diagnosed with unexpected physical and mental health-related illnesses by the new millennium. He was so prophetic, and I'll show you why in a second. One example of what may be the cause of future shock in Greater Cleveland is the recent shift in, now this is my first observation, as an indicator of what may be causing future shock today, like Toffler predicted within the millennium. I said, number one, outsourcing American jobs to countries overseas. According to Policy Matters, 44. Now remember, this data right here is outdated from when I did this study, because now that's almost like 14 years ago, something like that, a decade or more older. Okay, but it has gotten worse. Let me go on. According to Policy Matters, 44,000 manufacturing jobs alone were lost in Greater Cleveland from November 1999 to November 2003. 44,000 manufacturing jobs. In turn, unprecedented family disintegration due to loss of so many jobs may have been a consequence causing future shock, mental health related illnesses. Hopelessness and low self-esteem, perhaps due to joblessness, may have also contributed to so many adults abusing chemical and alcohol substances to cope with the realities of a society passing them by at supersonic speed. I'm going to get permission from Ms. Sabina to put these articles up on the website of the Unity Museum so you all can review this important 3-part series. And hopefully new scholars can come along and pick up the baton, because I'm doing too many other things to keep dealing with this. But the seed is being planted for you upcoming intellectuals and wannabe scholars tomorrow. But let me get back here. Hopelessness and low self-esteem, I talked about passing them by, society passing people by at supersonic speed. Thus, many of their children who entered the foster care system are diagnosed with anxiety disorders and emotional depression, and consequently need prescribed pharmaceutical drugs. There's a foster care issue here in King County. Too many kids are mental health related symptoms associated with future shock may also be due to, I say this, the inability of Black leadership to solve many of the structural economic new problems facing Black Clevelanders since the millennium. Their failure may be the cause of too many Black residents succumbing to widespread suspicion and mistrust of role model institutions like religious, political, education, and family institutions. Mistrust of traditional institutions, because along with the information age came, I'm gonna get this right here. Excuse me, Mr. Halpin. Here's some research that I put together. The rise of the service economy. This was a paper that I found in 2009. Now this is already, you see how long ago that was? The rise of a service economy. It is now basically the status quo. We don't get jobs. Excuse me again. Here's some more stuff that I found. I'm gonna just pick this up and set this all over here for a second. Oh, getting old.
Can you pass those?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. In addition to crime, murder, more women are being murdered. Women have been murdered unprecedentedly in this United States of America. In the 1990s, as issues, when Newt Gingrich and the Republican Party people were applying for power in the Congress, because of the unemployment of white males, they tried to blame it on affirmative action type stuff. They came up with a concept called the angry white male. But Black males were saying, well, why we angry too? You hear? But the Republicans will use these metaphors in order to boast themselves into empire power, because Hitler once said, the bigger the lie, the more people believe it. You see, but look at the reality. Missing murdered indigenous women and girls. This is a very important paper. Maybe we can get this also on the Unity Museum website. It's a very important study about how missing indigenous women, but not just indigenous women. You can't pick up you can't cut on the news about hearing how many white women are being shot and murdered here in the city of Seattle and King County through domestic violence, through drugs, by being homeless, just being raped. And here's some information. There you go, darling. Downtown, here's the local news in Seattle. Now I pulled this off. What year did I get this? This is 2013. Downtown street offenses going unpublished in the city of Seattle. When I first came here, downtown Seattle pioneered all of the museums. This is the only place I've ever lived in where you can walk from one museum to the other, and you never finish seeing the stuff. It's just so rich. The history here is so rich, and this is why the East Coast and the Midwest was developed 100 years before the Pacific Northwest. There's so much rich databases of information here that are not being told, because the researchers or academia, I don't know what's wrong with academia. I have a theory about that too. They don't teach radical thought no more in academia. Colleges are corporations today, like hospitals. And it's all about the money. They already got a movement going on to try and ban certain books and information in our culture. That's right out of the world of George Orwell's Newspeak. Keep people befuddled, deny them access to the right information they need. You can't even buy some of the books that I tried to look for, that I read over my years. When they cost like $5 when I was young, they're like $200 right now. We live in a country that promotes freedom of speech and information and freedom of the press, but just make it so high they can't afford it. You see, as another way to keep people denied the information they need, keep it lessened and bury it. But let me move on. So these are just here. Take this here, sweetheart. This is just look at this. Fight on site. Gang war menaces South King County. This was in what year was this? I found this here. This was 2011. There are so many gang activities here in King County in Seattle. You have the East African posse with these new immigrants that have come over here. You have the Asian mobs, the Hispanic mob. These drug cartels are up here because Seattle is an open drug market. People getting high right out there on the streets. I ain't never seen no stuff like that. I used to walk to those museums when I first came here, and I was so proud of Seattle. I was so just enjoyed them beautiful summer days. I found a museum in downtown Seattle around Occidental Avenue, and it's around King Street. It's called the National Gold Museum. Have anybody ever been to the National Gold Museum? Okay, we got two here, big three. The National Gold Museum, it tells the story of the Yukon Gold Rush and how so many people, when they came here on through Oregon Trail, they were looking for that gold. There's gold in the Yukon. So a lot of the immigrants that had settled in those northern cities, whatever, Horace Greeley once, he would tell them, go west, young man, seek fame and fortune. But when they found gold up there in the Yukon, the more wealthier people on the East Coast, they took those schooners around the Atlantic Ocean through the Gulf of Mexico, and they winded up through the Pacific Northwest down the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and they beat them here. They beat them to the gold. So those who could not take the schooner boats, they came by the wagon trains, and as a result of no more gold, the alcoholism was so available. Pioneer Square became Skid Row. When Henry Yesler started his logging, I think down Yesler, there was a waterway they used to send the logs down. And that was Skid Row. But Skid Row changed to imply the chronic alcoholism and drunkenness in Pioneer Square. The salons had brothels. One of the best cemeteries I ever visited was the Lakeview Cemetery here in Seattle, Washington. All of the pioneers are up there. The whole story. We found Madame Damnable, Mary Coughlin. She was the brothel queen. She was like the Miss Kitty on Gunsmoke in Pioneer Square. There's evidence that Jesse James visited Pioneer Square. And what's the guy, the gunfight at the OK Corral? What was the sheriff? Doc Holliday. That's all the rich history in Pioneer Square. I'm at this gold museum and I'm finding so much rich history. When the National Gold Museum is the only federal park in an urban setting. It's not Yellowstone Federal National Park. It's in Seattle, Washington, the National Gold Museum. So the rangers, the park rangers, you have to ask them, they have this huge big old rock of what is real fool's gold. And you have to ask them to get permission for them to bring it from behind the counter so you can see it. Now, it looks like gold. It could even feel like gold because it's an alloy. But remember in the old Western days, when somebody gave somebody a gold coin and they wanted to make sure it was gold, they would take the coin and because gold is soft. And if they bit into it, they would, oh, yes, you got a deal. But that fool's gold. If you bite into that rock that I looked at, there wouldn't be nothing up here. That's why it's called fool's gold, for suckers. So visit the National Gold Museum and let them show you that fool's gold rock, because I have adopted a metaphor for how they sucker us out here with fool's gold. You know, it glitters, it shines, but it's fool's gold. And I give you a perfect example. Okay, first of all, y'all understand what it means to think outside the box. When you think outside the box, you got to be clever, at least in theory. When I was in academia and thinking outside, I wanted to go to some more of the outsourcing and stuff, but I'm gonna move on. Thinking outside the box. Here's how it works. How can an auto mechanic build a car outside the garage? How can a carpenter build a coffee table outside a carpenter shop? I tell people it's no different than how you're gonna change human behavior and you're outside that behavior. It's fool's gold. That's the metaphor I adopted for that inside the box versus outside the box. They create these asinine concepts in academia so they can write papers. And they peer reviewed because nobody else want to read that stuff. So they justify the stuff, they call it peer review. But inside the box, men like me who have built careers inside the box, I tell people sometimes when I have spoken in audiences, and especially when some academic players up there with their tweed jackets on, their little patch on their arms, and like they looking so like they so smart because they want to be pure researchers, okay? I always bring up the old late George Reeves, better known as Superman, back in the 50s. Remember the Superman series? When George Reeves, so sometimes when we watch it, I just watch it to laugh. When he fly into the building, one time there was some crooks robbing a safe, and they were on the other side of the wall. And Superman was standing up there like this here, with that big old S on his chest. You know, George Reeves, who played Superman, he was standing up there at the wall, just a wall. And then he started looking through it, and they put the animation like it was X-ray vision looking through the wall. And this big old picture came up, and he saw some crooks robbing a safe. And then Superman busted down the wall and took the crooks and nodded their heads together, and then called the police, and they called them off to jail, And then Superman flew out there and put back on his Clark Kent disguise. That's academia. They forever want to play Superman with our behavior out here, our needs. They create asinine concepts like fool's gold to keep the population bemuddled, just like George Orwell talked about in Newspeak. I tell you another metaphor that they came up that led to a lot of consequences. The right-wing element of this country, back in the late 70s, something like that, this paper was written called Broken Windows Theory. I had that here somewhere. Let me get this Broken Windows Theory. Anybody, excuse me, whose coffee is this here? Jim, keep hope alive.
Yeah, that's right.
But let me see, I gotta find Broken Windows Theory. Oh, where is my Broken Windows Theory? Oh, I think it was James Q. Wilson from, I think it was Harvard University. It's here somewhere. Jesus. Do anybody see Broken Windows Theory and the stuff that's passing around? Christopher, look through that. It might be.
Just tell us about it.
Okay, well, anyway, here's how the Broken Windows Theory works. When Nixon and Reagan and all became president, crime had gotten so out of control. James Q. Wilson there was another Wilson. I don't want to mix them up. But anyway, he said that if you catch a child who did wrong at a young age and punish him harshly, so hard that they'll never do it again. And the metaphor about that is that, let's say I was a teenager, juvenile delinquent, and I threw a brick through a window, and instead of just letting me off, and they put me in detention home and all of that, punish me, catch them at that age, and then they'll be good, decent citizens for the rest of their life. That type of thinking led to a lot of mandatory sentencing laws being passed across this country, which locked up a lot of people for non-necessary things for lengthy periods of time. The broken windows theory. Again, academia, to write papers. Fool's gold. So when somebody tell me, when I'm at a conference and I speak, and especially when academic players, they're always trying to justify themselves. So somebody never sees to make when they raise their hand, oh, Dr. Perkins. And they always sound like they just left jolly old England or somewhere, you know? And I'll say, yes. And they'll say, but sometimes we're in the box. The problem is so overwhelming. You have to just get out of the box, even if it's just to revamp, to rethink. And I told him, no, you don't get out of the box. You go get in the corner. Get on top of the box. Go sit in the window. But in order to fix the problem, you must be in proximity of the problem. Otherwise, like Ecclesiastes says in the Bible, it's vanity. Homelessness, mental illness. Billions of dollars are being spent on mental illness and homelessness. But where's my article about outsourcing of American jobs?
Oh,
Right there.
I knew I passed this stuff too
We
fast.
did, no, we did, we looked at
I
it.
think it's in that pile right there.
Jim, I think it's in your hand.
No, we just had it.
We just had it.
Your coffee cup again, duh.
Here, I'll take
You
it.
gotta go somewhere.
So
Find it.
Cameron, take his coffee
let's
cup.
get this coffee cup to this gentleman over here. That's too big.
Thank you.
That's a nice little cup there, you know.
Look in this pile, I think.
I found it.
Just,
Let me see. What am I looking for?
Outsourcing.
Outsourcing. Okay. Wise guy.
Want more coffee?
No, oh, thank you, no.
Listen.
Okay, thanks.
Outsourcing of American jobs. Millions and millions and millions of jobs have been outsourced. Look, do a Google search and see how much research is out there about outsourcing of American jobs. A lot of these universities, look, the definition of outsourcing, the practice of having certain job functions done outside a company instead of having an in-house department or employee handle them. Functions can be outsourced to either a company or an individual. I mean, that is a rude definition. I would interject something else in that. But anyway, how outsourcing jobs affects the U.S. economy. It's still about the bottom line, the dollar. How outsourcing jobs affects mental illness, because where's the human rights? Let me show you this here. Excuse me. Virginia, would you take this, please? Okay, because I need to keep this handy right here. Here, this is Article 23 that my friends here at the Unity Museum, they have a whole PowerPoint thing about all of the articles of the Human Rights Declaration by the United Nations. What constitutes human rights? And listen here. Article 23, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. 2, everyone without any discrimination has the right to equal pay for equal work. 3.3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Social safety net programming. 4, everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interests. I would have this modified to his or her interest today, you know. It was such a, 1948, such a male patriarchal type, world we lived in, but I'm not going to go down that alley because it's just, I won't stop. Take this, Now, so here's outsourcing. Let's look at King County in Seattle. Thousands of jobs have left here. They had a college professor from India teaching in the Foster School of Business here at the University of Washington, teaching his graduate students how to get consulting jobs showing firms how they can go to other countries. You can't go into a store today and pick up stuff made in America. It's China, Vietnam, Indonesia, Mexico. I have a theory. It's easy for them to go over there because, first of all, here's how it works. The Rust Belt, before they lost those manufacturing jobs in Pittsburgh and the Mon Valley, that where they were making steel in Ohio and all of that, it was called the Rust Belt, the heart of industry, industrialization in America. Then they found a way to get around unions. So the corporations, the bosses of these industries, there was no unionizing in the South. So they went from the Rust Belt to what was called the Sun Belt. Jobs started leaving Ohio for places in the South that had no unions. It was about the money.
Always.
But when unionism hit the South, somebody got a bright idea. Well, why don't we just get the hell out of here, period? But nobody is questioning where all of this garment stuff is being made. Are there sweatshops in China? Are there abuses of child labor laws in these countries that so we can sit around with a sweater on made somewhere? We will save a buck because if their wages are not the same, corporate greed and profits, they're living like they can buy islands now. Our world is so being threatened under this era of Futureshock and maladaptation. Now we're being threatened. We're on the cusp of nuclear war. If you look at anything about history, prelude to war is going on right now. We got this situation in the Middle East, in the Gaza, now Iran. Now the United States has sunk a couple of Houthi boats because they're interfering with the ships that come here through that Strait of Hormuz from China. What's this company here? Maverick. The name of the shipping industry. These ships. Maersk. Yes. Those ships are being attacked as they come in through the Middle East to get to the Pacific. The United States military just shot up 3 Houthi ships from Iran. North Korea is rebuilding nuclear armament, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Seattle is a major target because of the information technology and corporations here that build these information technology platforms. I'm concerned about the loss of human life when we have so many people who are wealthy building underground cities and tunnels. The world population right now has exceeded 8 billion people. Technology, artificial intelligence, if we wiped out half the planet, people can come up from underground and live like gods in paradise.
Maybe.
It's just something to think about, okay? Because if you look at the Bible, Armageddon, there won't be nobody nowhere. You see, but I don't want to get religiously, on that line of thinking. I'm just giving an idea about we are being threatened and nobody's talking about it. I can't stand to cut that TV on and every time I turn around, it's about the Seahawks. It's about the weather. Yes, ma'am.
I think you're correct in that because before World War II in Germany, the gross national product was way out of whack. And the food prices, people didn't realize that the food prices were so high, but that was the first thing that was going to happen before the war. That they hid from the people was how the gross national product has changed. And it's changed for us in the U.S. And no one's talking about it.
It's called.
Well, they are. I mean, it's mimicking 1930s.
Yeah, I've always read that.
Precursors of war.
It was happening in Germany before World War II.
It was a prelude to war, is what they call it.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, is it a prelude to war now?
That's it. Thank you very much, Miss Susan Plunkett.
Deja vu.
I think it is so concerning. We're in such dire situation that people better wake up, because all it's going to take is one incident.
Well, it's a flashpoint. And there are several going on right now.
Yeah.
In the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine.
Several places,
thank you.
Taiwan's recent election, I mean, we're all over the world on this right now.
I think we are seeing the prelude. I thought that for a long time.
But that same prelude also gave rise to your Adolf Hitlers, your Tojos, and your other dictators in these other countries.
Our own dictator.
We got people here right now. Let me show you something. Excuse me, Finn. Look at this here. I bought this here too out of my little box of stuff that I should be throwing some of this stuff away. Here's a study I did in Ohio also. Is this on YouTube, Mr. Cameron?
Yeah, it is. Everything that you're doing is on YouTube.
Okay, now this study I did right here, and I presented at a forum that was called Your Health and Alcohol-Related Disorders in Cuyahoga County. Let me get this YouTube up. Let me get this picture up here now. Alcohol-related disorders. This was the study I did and presented at. It was an honor to go back to Cleveland State University and to do this kind of study, because it was Cleveland State University where I became, I first started college after Upward Bound, and I became an activist, a radical, and power to the people. You know, we had big old afros and we wore them Stag Heel shoes and we were dancing disco, staying alive, John Travolta and all of us, we the same age, you hear? But anyway, I don't want to get thrown off. But look, here's the study on health-related disorders. I opened it up. In 1945 Hollywood, Ray Milland played Don Burnham,
Yes.
well, okay, the Lost Weekend. Now remember, this is 1945. It's about 10 years or a little bit more after the repeal of Prohibition. So if you look at alcoholism, people can drink now. Drink was the drug of the day. The Lost Weekend, 1945, Hollywood actor Ray Milland played Don Burnham, a down-on-his-luck novelist and alcoholic in the Paramount classic, The Lost Weekend. Unable to afford a bottle of rye whiskey, Don Burnham sinks to committing petty thefts as a way of getting money to buy it. Additionally, he suffers low self-esteem and frequent depression from constant maneuverings to hide from relatives and friends a serious drinking problem. Thus, while alone in a dimly lit apartment, he succumbs to delirium tremens, a psychotic condition where the mind plays tricks on the susceptible alcoholic. Visual symptoms of delirium tremens include seeing creatures such as bats and rats that are not there, or spiders. Consequently, Don Burnham wakes up in a hospital psychiatric ward for the alcohol addicted and the insane. So this is how I opened up this article, and I found that on YouTube, on one of those platforms, and I cropped it into there. You know, that picture of Ray Milland, he was a great actor. So now, The Lost Weekend won Mr. Milland an Academy Award. He well deserved it. He won an Academy Award. His performance about dysfunctional behaviors of a classic alcoholic, one who hides a serious drinking disorder, renewed public concerns about alcoholism. A little more than a decade after the 1933 repeal of Prohibition, the Volstead Act of 1919, that was Prohibition. The movie's portrayal of art imitating life also won attention from the medical community. They were concerned about health problems and excessive long-term drinking causes and how it deteriorates mental and physical health. Now, watch this here. In Cuyahoga County, this report presents preliminary findings of how excessive drinking or abuse of alcohol is a leading cause of death, health-related problems, and the threat of public safety in Cuyahoga County. Local medical doctors at Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, Case West Reserve Medical University, and Metro Health Hospital were interviewed to discuss medical complications from excessive long-term drinking, such as liver cirrhosis, heart disease, hepatitis, kidney failure, cancer, diabetes, and mental depression. Charts and tables are used to illustrate which county residents are likely to be victims of homicide, suicide, morbidity diseases, in-home accidents, and more from alcohol and or drug abuse. Observations from nationally recognized medical physicians and healthcare substance abuse policymakers are referenced to support local observable evidence in 4 following categories. I'm going to move this forward. I'll see to it that if Ms. Zabina don't mind, we could put it up online and people can have access to the study.
Sure.
It's not an outdated study, but I'm going to show you some findings.
Well, we know alcoholism and drug abuse is fentanyl, and let's call it what it is. We're in it.
The methodology I use, I collected data, I interviewed doctors, I interviewed police, I interviewed public safety people all across the board on this here. I defining 3 categorical disorders: binge drinking, alcohol abuse or excessive alcohol dependence on alcoholism. Drinking, what is, I'm gonna move this forward. There was a beautiful record by Earth, Wind & Fire. Where have all the flowers gone? Oh Lord, it was by some hippie guy wrote it. Was it Bob Dylan who wrote Where Have All the Flowers Gone? So. But then Earth, Wind & Fire just took it to another level. Who? Pete Seeger. Pete Seeger, thank you very much. Yeah. But that was one beautiful record, so I used this here as a little category. Where have all the flowers gone? The 1960s Vietnam protests sparked new civil disobedience, Today in Calhoun County, alcohol-related have citizen advocacy groups asking, where have all the flowers gone? Today in Calhoun County, alcohol-related disorders have citizen advocacy groups asking, where have all the flowers gone? Why and what needs to be done to stem the tide of homicides, untimely deaths, and poor health from excessive drinking alcohol? Boom, I'm gonna move on. I want to get to the charts. Okay, now look who dies more readily than anybody else: white males. Now, keep in mind, when I did this data here, this was in 2009 when I did this. But more work, it needs to be updated. Look at the graph. Total cases by race and gender. Total white males by this year. You see, non-white males. White males, non-white males. White females, non-white females. White males, non-white males. You look at the data over a trend, non-white females. White females and white males had disproportionately than anybody else because of alcohol-related disorders at that time. What's causing all of the overcrowding of our city morgues, county morgues today? This work needs to be updated, and academia needs to quit doing all that thinking outside the box. Get in it and get this data and let the people decide. That was a radical activist book also about community organizers called Let the People Decide. So, yes, ma'am.
That is the crux of our state, because we passed the law that Costco eliminated the middleman, so our alcohol went up, but yet we punish people who get drunk because the courts make money from DUIs. We want people to get drunk because we have heavy alcohol tax, but then we put them in jail because the courts make money. It's a catch-22 in our state.
Well, we don't support people getting drunk. The WHO just changed their stance this year. They said that no amount of alcohol is healthy.
Right. Used to be 2 glasses of wine, and now they say that's it. Any of it is simply not good for you.
Well, so many things are not good for us now. But anyway, look, baby boomers. I broke this down by generation. Baby boomers, and baby boomers disproportionately dying because that's our generation. I don't know whoever coined that concept. Baby boomers should be whipped. Tar and feathered, why do we have to be a baby boomer? I feel like Yahoo,
It was a boom of babies after the war.
Yeah. Oh, I know when they came about, but I mean, it was like people had babies, but the way that it's a metaphor for, like, you get the impression of yee-haw, baby boomer, you understand? But who cares? Listen, I'm gonna get out of this here. I think
it's a good analogy.
I think I'm gonna get out of this. We'll see about getting it off so somebody can pick up on that research and redo it and bring it up to date. So anyway, now I'm gonna discuss these 2 phenomena right here. When we look at Futureshock, from industrial to post-industrial to the information age, the concept that Mr. Toffler created also. When Sabina asked me to do this, it was a short time and I had so much work to do, so I just grabbed a lot of stuff. Otherwise, it would have been more if I had like
You're
a
doing
month.
great. You're doing great. You're doing great.
Let me get into some of Toffler's. Oh, where's my notes? Excuse me, Jim. I'm gonna slide over in here now. I always say pardon me when I get in front of somebody, you know. And it's Jesus.
Can you wing it?
It's over
It's,
here.
it's over here. It's
Yeah.
over here. It's over here somewhere. I see it. I see it. I see what I'm looking for. Right here. Okay. And my wrap-up notes. I want to talk about some of the concepts Alvin Toffler presented. It is still a very outstanding book. When Alvin Toffler first wrote Futureshock, I was so impressed. He wrote a trilogy of books afterwards. The second one he wrote was called The Third Wave.
Right.
The third wave was becoming this information age. All of this changing information. It's an outstanding book, The Third Wave. But then, this was by the 80s, the third wave. The Futureshock was the 1970s. 1980s was the third wave. And by the 1990s, power shift. Power shift is this outsourcing of jobs and how things have so changed in corporate America. It's an outstanding book to read. And it still have relevancy to this day. Why? Because I bought this book here to share with you all. Okay, let me set this. Thank you, Jim. Virginia, I want to try and straighten this out so I can get to it's going on 2:00. I got to wrap this up, and I need to discuss and wrap up. Now, here's this book that also came out in the 90s by Jeremy Rifkin, an economist. It's called The End of Work. The end of work. What does that mean? So I was attracted to this book just simply. Now, what do you mean the end of work? You know, what are we dead? That's the only way I know it's the end of work. You die. But he talks about the decline of the global labor force and the dawn of the post-market era. This is an outstanding book. The End of Work. The End of Work, here's Jeremy Rifkin. The End of Work warned, The End of Work, Jeremy Rifkin, 1995, warned us of a coming new millennium where traditional work would either decline or cease to exist altogether. And with that end of work, with that outsourcing of work, what did it leave in its wake? Chronic unemployment, people inability to adapt, college white males who traditionally were favored in the manufacturing firms because of discrimination before there was equal opportunity employment. A job gave a man dignity. Working class people thought they were middle class people because they had a car, a house, and a garage. Under the Interstate Transportation Act, under FDR and subsequently Harry Truman, people were permitted to leave the cities and go into these suburban communities. And they worked their factory jobs, whatever. It gave them dignity. A job gives a man dignity because he can buy things. He can buy a car. When I was in South Carolina teaching down there, this African guy named Dr. Mafuka, your proverbial clown in academia. I'm just getting ready to go grade some papers, so I got to go to the teacher's lounge, and that's where some of these players sit all the time, them coffee-drinking intellectuals, as we call them. Dr. Mafuka was an African from Zimbabwe. So I'm going with my Roman noodles to go nuke them up in this microwave in the teacher's lounge, and who would I run into? You had the white faculty over in their little tables in the teacher lounge, and there was this African who tried to play me. I'm coming in, and soon as he see me, he was, Dr. Perkins, may I have a word with you? Like he had just left jolly old England or somewhere, you know? And I'm saying, I've got my noodles and stuff. All I'm doing is trying to go nuke them up. So I go back to my office and grade some papers. My mother used to always teach us as children, nobody know what you're thinking. Just keep smiling. You can think that thought. You can think anything about these players. So this is what I'm thinking about. I'm coming in there. When I heard him call my name, I'm saying, now what the he cracked this. I'm using the expletive saying this silly. This is what I'm thinking, but I'm smiling. But I'm looking at him dead in the face and I'm saying, you clown. You hear? So he says this to me. He says, Dr. Perkins, may I have a word? I said, yeah, Dr. Mafuka, what's going on? He said, the black people here in South Carolina, they work so hard, but they don't have nothing to show for it. So if ever you watch the Three Stooges, there's this one episode called Niagara Falls. When somebody pissed off Mona on the stage and he goes, Niagara Falls, slowly I turn, step by step. I done him, and I knocked him down. So that's the metaphor how I replied to Dr. Mafuka with that, how he tried to play me about poor people in South Carolina, okay? That work so hard, but they don't have nothing to show for it. This is how I replied with a smile. I said, Dr. Mafuka, he said, yes. I said, you're from Zimbabwe, right? Yes. I told him Zimbabwe used to be called Rhodesia. For over 500 years, the British just got off them boats and just conquered you Africans. I said, today it's called Zimbabwe. Now, he didn't know that when we were young activists in the 70s, we marched on Washington to decolonize a lot of those African colonial countries. He didn't know that my history going back to that because of our activism. It was when Jimmy Carter became president, he passed the Asylum Seeking Act to allow black asylum seekers to come to America. So at one time, America did not let no black asylum seeker or refugee in this country at all until President Jimmy Carter. But we led the activism. We marched on Washington. I still have pictures of us as young activists, doing a power to the people. All down 1600 Avenue, the Capitol. So this is how I replied to Dr. Mafuka, that wise guy who thought he was playing me. He thought he was coming to get, instead he got. I said, Dr. Mafuka, you're from Zimbabwe. Now it's Rhodesia. Rhodesia, now it's Zimbabwe. I said, the black people in Zimbabwe, they work so hard, but they don't have nothing to show for it. I told him, but here in this country, my people in this state work so hard. You can work so hard in America and have a Cadillac sitting in front of your apartment if you don't have no grass. I told him that my people in this country, we work so hard. They work so hard. They got every electrical appliance in their house from A to Z. I was saying A to Z before Jeff Bezos even created Amazon. A to Z. That's why I love that symbol, A to Z. I said, my people got TVs, CDs, washing machines, dryers. Some got 2 TVs. I said, but in your country, they work so hard. They never had nothing in them shanty shacks they live in. Nothing. That's why you're here. Because ain't nothing over there. You hear? He never talked to me again. He was always careful when I came in there. Because like I said, he thought he was coming to get, instead he got. In my line of work, I deal with a lot of these players. Some of them have 2 PhDs and I'm out fox them. You hear? But anyway, I'm going to start leading up to a conclusion. This museum right here, when I first met Zabina, it was this gentleman over here by accident we met. Our great Congresswoman, Pramila Jayapal, was doing a town hall, and I wanted to hear because I respect her and I support her. And there was this nerd-looking guy, looked like one of them kind of players out of one of them Clark Kent movies, But we started talking because he admired Pramila too, and he had some stuff about this Unity Museum that Cameron started telling me about. He invited me. And it's because of him that I'm here today. It's because of him that I met her and I met the great Dr. Amy Colbert. Now, Their stories are so rich. Dr. Amy Colbert, her parents' history, her father was a great scientist, paleontologist, archaeologist. They have fossils that he found, and he created the concept of Pangea. Our Earth was one continent before intercontinental drift. That's the daughter of this man. They got a whole collection of his books and photos. Zabina's history. This woman is worldly known. She's been to so many different countries. I lost count of sometimes. Sometimes when I come in here and talk to Sabina, I always tell her, do you all remember Rocky and Bullwinkle show that used to come on TV back in the 50s and 60s? Rocky's the flying squirrel and Bullwinkle the moose. Anybody remember Rocky and Bullwinkle? Remember when Bullwinkle would say, hey Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. And Rocky would say, again, Bullwinkle. And Bullwinkle would have this magician's hat, and he would tap it with a baton light, and he'd say, nothing up my sleeves. And then he would say, when he go into the hat, everything came out other than a rabbit. He brought out lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, but never a rabbit. See, that when I talk to Zabina, it's like I'm talking to Bullwinkle. I don't know what she's gonna come out of that hat, that head of hers. Her knowledge is so depth. She'd have met some of the most famous people that I have imagined, and I just, what? You know, whether she was in England or here in the United States, I'm talking about a whole list of great ones. This Unity Museum, before I move on, I want to mention two more books. Okay, one of them is The Tyranny of Kindness by Teresa Fornocello, Dismantling the Welfare System to End Poverty in America. Oh, come on, fools gold. But she talks about, it's an outstanding book about the welfare system, the tyranny of kindness of a service economy. And that's how come some people today rather be homeless than go into these shelters where they got to go by all of these rules. They come up with rules. Dictatorship of the service economy, the tyranny of kindness. It's a very interesting book. This one here. Oh, Virginia, I thought you were going to put this. I found this here at an old, sometimes we look at books. They got these little bird cages where they have books public can read in neighborhoods. So we look at them so we go for walks. And I found this one, an old classic. Was it one of them? Or did we get this?
The Mattery Circle.
The Mattery Circle. Okay, now Robert Ludlum talks about, a lot of his characters are espionage players, like The Bourne Identity, and a lot of them kind of movies that came out of his books. This one right here was one of the greatest ones that I've ever read, because even though he got all of the martial arts and the sexual stuff in here with these secret agents around the world, what this one spy discovered was the dictatorship of the corporations. They were the real problem that this secret agent uncovered, the corporations in their little circles. That exists to this day. When you have people in service economies and government, they think they can do almost anything because they pay protection to the unions. It's almost like out of Don Corleone, the Godfather. Make them an offer they can't refuse. So you got those who are in, this was the Maltese premise. If you're in the corporations, you're protected and safe. And if you're not, you're on your own. Dictatorship of the corporations, the haves and the have-nots. How are we going to fix this chronic unemployment out here? How are we going to fix homelessness? And there's no jobs in America. Now we're being threatened by new forms. Oh, here's another one that I brought into my little archives I found. The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This was a great book by Ralph Ellison because when he wrote The Invisible Man back in the 1950s, Ralph Ellison basically was a light-skinned African-American, but he was still a black Negro. White racists or the white culture just would not even look at a black man on the street. They would turn their heads, whatever. So that's when he coined the concept, the invisible man. He wanted to be seen. He wanted to be expressive. Let's update the invisible man. Let's update the invisible man when we see these homeless guys out there on the streets, white guys or anybody else, banging garbage cans and shouting, no, no. One day, Virginia and I was going into one of the supermarkets on Broadway in Harvard, the QFC, right down there near Republican Street. And this white guy, he was just standing there on the corner. No, no, no. And I walked by and I said, yes, yes. But because I shouldn't have did that, when we left the supermarket, I gave a donation of $10 because I felt bad, you know. So sometimes I'm a good Christian, you hear? Now, when I say sometimes I'm a good Christian, somebody always say, sometimes. I say, yeah. And they say, well, why aren't you a good Christian all the time? Especially when I got ministers around me, you hear? I tell them because my great-grandmother told us that if anybody tell you they're a good Christian all the time, you talking to the devil. Because even Jesus left after Mary Magdalene, and he was the Son of God. You hear? He's in the flesh. So we try to do good, but I'll never tell anybody that I'm a good Christian all the time. No, I say sometimes I'm a good Christian because the devil made me do it. You know? Okay, so let me move on. So the invisible man is a metaphor that the homeless people, we don't want, like they didn't want to look at the black man on the street. People don't like looking at the homeless. They don't want to acknowledge them. So they do behaviors out there to see me. It's almost like they want attention. So they banging garbage cans or angry because they feel invisible. And here is a book that I got. We went to one event. I think it was an event to support Recovery Cafe, one of their galas, Virginia. Now, when they were passing out a lot of these things, and I found this interesting, the Emerald City Resource Guide that Real Change prints out about where all of the social service agencies one can go and get help with, the rise of the service economy, just like was predicted in those articles, and that Alvin Toffler, with the shift of jobs out of America, everything about a service, but always keep this in mind. In order to provide a service, somebody got to be at the bottom of the well. I put together a project model that the city was going to fund. It was so simple. We can use this technology to train people. I did a project in Ohio for this organization, Youth Opportunities Unlimited, and Carol Rifkin was a corporate kingpin in downtown Cleveland. She heard what kind of work I did, so she invited me out for lunch. I went there. I toured their United Way agencies and all of that stuff because she was a corporate woman, but she was also in the public sector. And she asked me, she said, Dr. Perkins, can you design a project so young people can get an entrepreneurial experience? I took that challenge up. I did the research. What can they use with this new technology? I found a school in rural Michigan, a suburban school, where young people were making their own T-shirts with simple heat press technology. I wrote them. They invited me to the school. Youth Opportunity Unlimited. They paid all of my expenses to spend a week up there, following those young people, how they set up their own. They were selling their own T-shirts to the local school bands, to the local corporation people. They had their own production right inside that high school in this rural area of suburban Michigan. I brought that idea back in concept and created that project for them young people. Senator George Voinovich was there because he was a sponsor of that Youth Opportunities Unlimited. And the young kids, inner city kids, were making their own T-shirts. They got the equipment. They bought the low-cost equipment where they can make their own mugs, all of that stuff with this heat press technology.
We have it right here in the museum.
So let me tie this in. I took that same concept to some of those churches in that Pioneer Square, that Union Gospel Mission, and some of these other reverend players out here. And I propose we need space. Let's take these homeless people and make entrepreneurs out of them. Let's let them make their own income. Let's let them dig their way out of homelessness, mental illness. Let them get some dignity by selling stuff other than just a Real Change newspaper. They were going to first support it. The Technology Matching Fund grant, it was for $50,000 at the time. I think that was in 2012 or 13 or something, or 2011 or 12 or whatever. And at the last minute, the guy that runs the Union Gospel Mission called me and they bailed out. This is what he said. Dr. Perkins, if they make any money, they'll just want to do more drugs or drink more alcohol. I said, how can you say that about everybody? He collectively put everybody in that because they need them in order to get money from you. as a service economy, somebody's gonna always gotta be at the bottom of the well so you can, because if you fix the bottom, then the middle is gonna be in their place. So they gotta stay on top. But the American way have always been pick yourself up by your own bootstraps. You thinking you grow wealthy in America. Let me tell you how I got through undergraduate college, and this is a true story. And I told this to my students because they're not doing nothing crooked. In order to get unemployment compensation in Ohio back in those days, you need at least 15 weeks on the job. You can't quit. You have to be fired. So I played the fast food restaurant game. McDonald's, Burger King, Mr. Heroes, Wendy's. I was this greasy black guy with this afro with this hot and juicy red shirt on at this Wendy's waiting for my 15 weeks to be up so I can find a way to get fired so I can go declare my unemployment compensation so I can sit in them libraries. And I would go to different libraries. If Cleveland State closed at a certain time, I went to Case Western Reserve because they were open all night because the rich people there working on MD degrees and all of that, and the other bourgeoisie element that went to Case, that could afford Case Western University, they did not close those libraries. So after I got my 15 weeks and I'm at this one Wendy's and I'm cooking this hot and juicy, greasy hamburger, and the suburban, it was always in suburbs, and the suburban nights, they get off of work and they want their hot and juicy. And I gotta get fired. I can't quit. So I'm dropping the burgers on the floor and I'm looking like that. And then I'm picking it up. One day the manager, one of these Kowalski players, chubby guy, he Jeff, didn't I tell you? And I'm like, what am I doing, man? I got the spatula right here. I said, And then I'm like cooking the burgers and I'm waiting for to hear the key words because he knows that I done just fronted him off before the audience, a black man. You hear? He this chubby dude with this silly looking Wendy's hat on, white guy. In order to save face, he had to fire me, and I knew that. I was waiting for those key words. What? You're fired. But then I had to play this here game. What do you mean I'm fired? You can't do that. What do you mean I'm fired? And the audience, the white people are looking at him fire the Negro, yeah? So I'm just gathering up my things and still mumbling. Of course, I went straight to the unemployment compensation after that. I got you needed 15 weeks on the job in Ohio to get unemployment. You got 23 weeks of unemployment. And when there was a recession, you got about 26 weeks. That's how I was able to graduate with a cum laude degree, Bachelor of Science in Business and Public Administration, because I had the time and I had the resources. I had a check coming in. I lived in a nice small apartment. I had a little raggedy car. I had girlfriends because a brother working a job who got some money on driving a car kept a girlfriend in Cleveland. You hear? Mm-hmm. So I did that at McDonald's, Wendy's, always in the suburb, Mr. Heroes. And I was always in an assistant management position because I was in college. So I always got a good salary. So my unemployment was always good. And I graduated cum laude. You hear? I would tell my students, you're not doing nothing wrong. You're not going to be cooking no hamburgers for the rest of your life. That's why you're in college. You can't quit a job and get unemployment. You got to be fired. There's no shame in being fired from a Wendy's, a McDonald's, a Mr. Heroes. You hear? But that's what I mean by it. They didn't know that I would use the same knowledge on them. They didn't know that I would adapt the things that I was learning. Here's another example. When I went to this private college, when I transferred from Cleveland State to this private college to wrap up the business school, the one that John D. Rockefeller graduated from, that's what I wanted. You had to take these accounting 101s and all that, being a business curriculum, accounting 101, accounting 102, government accounting, da-da-da-da-da. What I found out was they were failing a lot of the black students there. They were failing them because, first of all, it was taking 4 weeks for them to cut those expense checks based on their student loans. And it was government under the Pell Grants at the time. According to the government law, they were supposed to cut those checks within 2 weeks when school started. But at this college, they were waiting 4 to 5 weeks before you got that refund check. And as a result, the students were failing before they got to midterm at the midterm stage. And therefore, when they got kicked out or they dropped out, the institution didn't have to pay them the refund. So, but, that didn't work with this man here. So I went to the library and I started reading the government policies on Pell Grants and all those other public policy grants about these student loans. I found out they supposed to release that within 2 weeks. So they had a school forum and the president was there and all that, and I challenged them about, y'all gotta have to cut that loose. You're gonna have to stop this, I said, because you're setting people up for failure. And I'll tell you another example how they co-opted to fail those students. They had an Indian guy in the accounting class. He was the graduate assistant. And he was helping people with this accounting. The professors, when they were showing how to do these accountings, these input, throughputs, all the FIFO, LIFO, and all that stuff, when they gave the test, they were leaving out various variables. They had not taught the students the complete model how to solve that problem. They used the pretext that they want them to think. They justified cheating people. So now this Indian guy made a bad mistake one day. He was not in that office when I came in there, and there was other people coming in and out, but I saw something sitting over there that he would use. It was called the Solutions Manual. It had all of the solutions on how to do those problems from A to Z. And because I was a radical and we believed in liberation of stuff, I liberated that manual. I went from an F on that first test, I got an A out of the class before I got out of there. Because I knew how to do it now. I found out that they were leaving out variables. And that's how come the students were failing. They were being set up for failure. The girls, because I went from a D on a paper, the first test. Next year, A plus. The women in there started thinking, the women that were saying he's a genius. They were talking about I was a genius. So I got a chance to go to their house and help them with their stuff. And they would have stuff nice cooked for me. And every now and then I got a kiss. You hear? Because they thought I was a smart man. I really wasn't, a genius. I just knew how to do them because I had the solution, the manual. They were not teaching us the right way. So I became like an independent teacher. You hear? So did I do a crime? Did I commit a crime? That's the question. Did I steal something? Or did I liberate the information that I needed to succeed and help others to succeed?
You worked the system.
Huh?
You worked the system.
I worked the system.
The system did not work you. You worked the system.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. I don't work a whole lot of systems.
I know, right?
Yes.
You worked the system. The system
Too many.
did not work you.
But anyway, to make a long story short, I don't encourage students to do what I did. But revolution is revolution. So there again, we back to that think outside the box and in the box game. When I tell people real change agents are in the box, because that's where the problems are. When I hear your mayors and others on television talking about they're going to address homelessness because they're thinking outside the box, I told Virginia, they're not going to fix it. Everybody's talking about everything but jobs. A human right. I showed you that. Where was this here? Article number 23, the Human Rights Declaration. Employment is a human right. When I did that study on chronic unemployment and correlated it with crime in other countries, and I looked at it from a global perspective. In Korea, South Korea, they had a category on their census, annual census. It was called wishing for work. Because of the unemployment at the time in South Korea, they had a category called wishing for work that we don't have here. Germany passed policy so hard for corporations that if they outsourced out of Germany, they would be taxed so hard they were forced to stay in Germany because the Germans didn't want to see their people suffering Futureshock because of unemployment. But there's no protection in America. Now we have a new threat to our employment infrastructure. Artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence was coined by Herbert Simon, Carnegie Mellon University professor. And I forgot the name of the book, but I had an opportunity to meet the late, great Dr. Herbert Simon because I was at the University of Pittsburgh and it was right across this parking lot from the Carnegie Library Institute, and then there's the Carnegie Mellon I walked over there to visit. I called them, set up an appointment. I told him I just got to see you because I was so impressed with his book that I was reading when I was taking my information and all them other technological classes at the University of Pittsburgh. My work has partnered at the pioneering study when the Carnegie Library was putting computers in public libraries, and they wanted to see would people go to public libraries. There were PCs because this was the movement 80s or 90s when the personal computer was rising. Jim Wellborn was the president of the Carnegie Library. He hired me from a recommendation by one of my professors in these information technology, this class I had. And I got an internship to do my master's thesis on the JobNet project. Jim hired me because they wanted me to canvass 3 targeted neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, the Glen District, South Side, Oakland was where all of the Pitt and the universities are, and the Hill District. I created a learning tool from when people are introduced to new technology or new information. It was a qualitative design, but I quantified it by expression. You know, when you tell somebody something new and they, aha, you know, give you the looks, it's like a light bulb goes up in the head. It's body language. It's qualitative research. And I did this timeline, this graph. They used and I did my master's thesis on it. The Carnegie Library used my master's thesis and got $150,000 more from the Kellogg Foundation in order to put computers in public libraries. Every time I go into a public library today, from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I see people sitting in there, I was a part of those pioneer studies, and I'm proud. And my master's thesis is still on the library shelf at the University of Pittsburgh. If don't nobody believe me, go check it out. I'll make a believer out of you. So anyway, in conclusion, I want to say this here. Being at the Unity Museum, I am taking on a new goal. I used to teach my students, never be afraid to step up to the goal of a challenge, the goal line of a challenge. We got to get this rich museum on the ground. Let me show you these pictures here. As long as, let me get these here pictures. Here's the Unity Museum. I came here and did some interviews with Zabina and others. So this is my pictures. There's the entrance to the Unity Museum. This is this entrance on the University Ave District. Ave. But watch this. This is what's interesting next. You see that? Look at this here. I mean, I got sciatica pain in my legs. I'm 69 years old. I'm getting old, and I got to creep up these stairs. It's like the Twilight Zone. It's a nightmare. Let me show you this one here.
That's all we can afford.
Look at these stairs. Look at that.
What can we say?
Now watch this one here. Well, I think that's the last one, but let me show you this here. You got to be careful. When I was even a graduate student and I was working in Community Development Corporation and for the different foundations there in Pittsburgh, there was a protest at the federal building. Handicapped people were protesting for the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I joined their protest. It felt so good. I was older now, but you know, from the 70s to the 80s and 90s, I couldn't resist. So I had to be there. I was there with the kids in the wheelchairs and all of that, and you know, champion for the American Disabilities Act, because I also had relatives, people who were in handicapped chairs, were basically imprisoned in their apartments or houses. They couldn't go nowhere. The curbs on the sidewalks, they could not get up them, so they were trapped. They had no access to public transportation. They were living in a cocoon. But with the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, we have ramps now. We have sidewalks that go down where handicapped people can scroll up those with ease. This building here, as long as this is a situation to access this rich museum, it creates a disparate treatment for people who are elderly, for the handicapped. Now, I looked up the 2 concepts that grew out of discrimination. One is called disparate treatment. The other one is disparate impact. How do you make an argument by this not being an employer? She's not being an employer. It's not in an employment situation. This is a public facility of knowledge and information. It's a museum, and it discriminates against a certain class of people because they cannot get up these horrific stairs. And even going down the stairs, look at this here. I get vertical. I be like holding on to the banister. Did you ever see that movie with Jimmy Stewart called Vertical? Where he was, every time he got high, he would get this. That's coming down these stairs. Going up them is the blues. And coming down is bluer too. You know, I'd be like, hold on. We got to get the Unity Museum a building here so they can stay in University District. We got to get the Unity Museum a building where they can stay here with parking, where the handicapped can access it, the elderly and everybody else can come up here and enjoy this rich history. It's incredible. I encourage you all to come here. We're going to launch this year. We are in the process of launching this year a capital fundraising campaign to get the Unity Museum a building of their own in this district. And I'm not going to stop until I achieve that goal. By any means necessary. That's what Malcolm X told me. By any means necessary. Of course, I won't rob nothing to do it, or, you know. I'll be a good Christian sometimes. But anyway, disparate treatment, read one kind of unlawful discrimination in U.S. labor law. You hear? Everything is not about labor law and businesses. This is a public facility right here. And the way it is designed creates a disparate impact and treatment for people who are elderly, handicapped. Therefore, only a select group of people can come in. And everybody else get out. They need this museum needs to have its own house. And I know they have property here where we can get this museum its own house. This museum needs graduate assistants to come in here and do practicums that work with the operations manager, Mr. Cameron, to start archiving this rich stuff in this museum here. It must be preserved for 100 years. So, in the midst of Futureshock, we can fix that. We're in that millennium that Alvin Toffler talked about. College students need to start doing this research. These graduate students need to start doing these researches and making arguments logically and not fool's gold concept that they pick out of the sky. Like Superman, again, stand up there in front of that building watching the crooks rob the bank with X-ray vision. That's those players who talk that thing outside the box. It's fool's gold. You want to fix the problem, you got to be in the box. That's what the problem is. And that's how come out and done more impacts in my life. Brought millions of dollars from the East Coast to the West Coast. I presented my research in Spain in castles with descendants of pirates. When I got invited to this global conference, one of them academic terms, and I was invited, my department at the University of Penn called me. I was teaching a graduate class in health and public administration at the time in Midwestern State University, hot Texas. I had never been in a hotter place like that. When I got off that airplane from Pittsburgh International Airport right before 9/11 in that August, to be interviewed down there, when that Dallas door opened and that dry heat hit me, I was like, whoa! I thought I was in Hades or somewhere. You know, but I got a chance to go to this conference, and it's in a book, international book, and I presented my research on youth build and youth movements, that the Kennedys have a copy in their library. Senator Ted Kennedy, his nephew, Joseph P. Kennedy, when he was congressman, and they passed the youth build legislation that's got all of these youth build programs where kids learn remedial education and work one-on-one with the contractors. It started in Spanish Harlem. Now it's global, international, like Habitat for Humanity. I spent a week in Boston. I spent a week in California learning different computer software programs. I met the Kennedys, or Mr. Joseph Kennedy, when he was a congressman. When I told him what I was doing, I met him at the LAX airport, because all them Kennedys looked alike at that time, you know? And I was so honored to meet him. So he asked me to give him a copy. So when I finished my dissertation, I had a nice bound copy sent to him and Senator Ted Kennedy. I had this beautiful letter of thank you and acknowledgement. Also, Senator Ted Kennedy, I sent a lot of my research about when I did my policy paper. It was a year's study where I analyzed 3 different employment policies. One of them was Bill Clinton had a middle class employment policy. Then there was a third one. The one, when I put these weights onto which policy would work best in terms of these indices, administrative, operative, economically feasible, financially feasible, down, these different indicators to quantify which one of these policies are going to work best for the poor, unemployed people, or whatever, job training policies. The one that was weighted the worst was the Workforce Development Act, and that's the one that was passed. The Workforce Development Act, 1995, that came out of a lot of Republican champion, and they changed welfare. They changed a lot. They put conditions on people in America that have made people, because of their need for welfare, they got work requirements out here where they don't get no Social Security payments. They don't get no unemployment compensation, because you get a check from the government. You got to now work so many hours for free. White people have always played white people in America, just like they had slaves and played the black man against his will. They played the poor white man. They called them indentured servants. That's what these policies are doing today. They're creating indentured servants because of people needs. Where's that book? The Social Safety Net. The Social Safety Net.
It might be over here.
Here it is. Oop, there it is. Because the Social Safety Net. That's why I say I challenge any of these students in academia right now to go start looking at the history of all of these Republican players that keep back talking about cutting Social Security. Let's see how many food stamps fed them, especially start with Tim Scott, the Senator Tim Scott in South Carolina, the one that derailed the Gerald Floyd Justice and Policing Act because he let it run out of time. The dirty Uncle Tom rat, he derailed that. And where your Reverend Sharpens and all those other players that will be on CNN and all those other shows, MSNBC, Politics Nation, always talking about Trump. Gotcha. They talked about the Gerald Floyd and all these open murders we watch on television. Then when Tim Scott derailed that, where is that book, Virginia? The there you go, darling. Chris Argis, I mentioned earlier, the undiscussable. When they fail, policymakers fail. When black so-called leaders fail their people, it's the undiscussable. That awful show that comes on ABC, The View, Whoopi Goldberg, they got clowns sitting up there thinking they speak for men like me. The Puerto Rican lawyer on The View, when she was talking about Tim Scott derailing that Gerald Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the Republican girls just kept talking her over, talking her down, till she shut up, she got the message. You don't hear no more about the Gerald Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We have a major election coming up right now. You got people out there. Look at this. Scientific America, Truth versus Lies. Look at this here. Harper's Disinformed. This is, again, right out of Orwellian world, newspeak, double talk, because misinformation is like, when you look at this Colin Post article, I mentioned it here, a white male kills the security, the policeman in Cleveland Heights. It was a black male because somebody told me he was white. Somebody that was jealous of me at the school that I was working with. And I was waiting on the Cleveland Heights police to get back to me. I had to meet the deadline. I thought it was white because this guy said he was white. He was white because he was one of those black brothers that sit on them college campuses talking out the side of their neck all the time. Kwanzaa and Harambe wearing dashikis. And I tell them suckers all the time, you ain't going back to no Africa with all that food here in America with your fat ass. You hear? I say, Africa trying to come over here. They made Kwanzaa up. One woman, she got fired from one of those TV talk shows because she made the statement that Santa Claus was white. and the black community attacked her. And I said, I saw nothing wrong with what she said because Santa Claus is white. He's Kris Kringle. He's Miracle on 34th Street. You know, I ain't got no problem with that. A black Santa Claus, we don't look right. The suit don't look clean. It looks dirty. You know, let white people have Santa Claus. You know, Saint Nick is okay. But look at truth versus lies. That's misinformation right there. When you get a typo on the news, and I corrected it in this second part right here. Here's the correction from when I mentioned it was a white person and it was a black guy. That's misinformation. Disinformation is outright lies. Tell the truth. They're confusing our kids out here. This stuff is in the media. They adapt these concepts because they sound good. Then they got that guy that's always talking about a hoax and everybody done him wrong. He stole the election. He broke the 14th Amendment about insurrection. The Democrats should be hammering him day in and day out because the Republicans, when they get something, they never let it go.
It's 2:30.
Okay, so anyway, ladies and gentlemen, to make a long story short, I want you all to support the new. We're going to put a petition online to see how many people will sign it so we can see is there a demand. Let the people decide. Only you can determine whether or not we're going to achieve that goal to open this museum up to the public so everybody can have access to it and not just the privileged ones who can walk up without nothing or can scramble their way up like me through pain and then be scared to go down the stairs, but still got up here. But for everybody. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. It was a quick fix. I got called about a week ago and I just grabbed everything I had. If I had a month, I would have been a little bit more smooth. You hear? Okay.
Thank you.
Keep hope alive. Rainbow Coalition.
So the main point is now, thank you very much. And Cameron, can we take YouTube up? We got food there. So I think everybody is hungry by now.
Well, I think you're right.
Go and grab something. Oh, I love your pants.
Oh, thank you. They're warm.
And so, thank you very much.
I hope I wasn't too